Hi everyone, Saul Sunforge for Dungeons and Taverns. Hopefully you're all having a wonderful day. Today's first video is going to actually be a D&D horror story. I wasn't sure if I wanted to put this out there because I'm over the situation that happened to me personally, but I thought that there might be a lesson in here somewhere. Although, looking back on it after about 2 years of time, I'm not exactly sure what the lesson is for me. I'll explain the story to you and a little bit of the backstory on the story, and you let me know. All right, so my best friend, who I'm going to be making a video with later, hopefully, and the one who's in the VR demo footage with me, and he'll be on the channel more frequently because he's a DM and a player and just a really good, cool guy. We had an in-person campaign, and he invited some of his friends, and then by extension, some of their friends, and some relatives also. And at first, I didn't know these people before the campaign started, and over time, we became what I thought was pretty good friends over D&D. And that's kind of the goal for D&D, really. If you're not trying to make friends, then the campaign might not feel as special to you, maybe. But we had an in-person campaign, and his was about a year long, and throughout that year, the little bit of role building and things that you see, my maps, sometimes you might see my maps in the background and things like that. That was all made primarily for that in person tabletop group. I'm using it, that my creations, I'm not throwing them away. I'm expanding on them for my Roll20 group currently, and so it's beneficial to me. But the things that I was creating was for to actually play with minis at a table with people, and this was prior to COVID, and then through the beginning of COVID, the group was great. It was pretty good. There were some players in it that I consider to be problem players in some ways. Some people, I understand, everybody's different and things like that, and so things that you may consider to be a yellow flag are just that. They're just cautionary flags. If there's too many of them, then they switch over to red flags, right? But we played for about a year, and throughout that year, I was creating my stuff in order to facilitate them after his campaign was over, so that I would run it. And throughout that whole year, it seemed like when I talked about it, there was excitement, and that I would talk about it just a little bit and stuff, and things that were happening with my D&D Roll20 group, that you can see the campaign here on the channel. And there seemed to be pretty good excitement, and that excitement excites me, and therefore has me create more stuff, and on and on. One of the players, I'm not gonna name names here. One of the players was new to D&D. He had experience with D&D by watching Critical Role. And Critical Role is a great show. It's not typically how D&D is run. People don't typically have anywhere near the budget they have, but it's a great show. We might cover some that stuff in depth, my feelings on that show and its relation to D&D and things like that in the future. but I'm digressing. So let's go ahead and continue. So over the course of that year, as the campaign was starting to come to a close, this player wanted to be the DM, which is cool. It's great. I encourage people who are players, if they want to try their hand at DMing, to do so. I'm not gatekeeping. That's not who I. That's not really who I am. I want the hobby to expand, and when it does, then there's more DMs, and then there's more players and more DMs, and more, and it keeps going. And I think D&D's reached that tipping point now that it's just got very good forward momentum. So, he wanted to DM, and we agreed that we were all going to take turns, because a lot of the players at the table were DMs. And I believe maybe even primarily DMs, not forever DMs, certainly. There's a distinction. And we were going to take turns, and I thought this group was going to last, for like a decade, through all these different campaigns and interesting stories and things like that. And he did run some one-shots, when our campaign wasn't in session. For whatever reason, we didn't have all of our players that day or whatever. And, yeah, he did a good job. He did a good job. I'm proud of him. I still am. Even though we're no longer friends, I'm still proud of him. But I noticed as the session was coming closer to an end, he was getting more insistive, kind of putting in little comments that made it seem like he was going to go next, even though before the campaign even started, me and my friend agreed that I would go next. Because I don't really get to be a player very often, hardly ever. I've been playing D&D pretty much for 18 years with a little bit of breaks in between. Like I didn't play any of 4th edition at all, for instance. I didn't even know there was a 4th edition because I was so far away from D&D at that point. But so we agreed that I was going to be the DM next. After his campaign, and that's why I started creating what I did, and that's why the D Live group has as much as they have. They would have had a lot, but they wouldn't have had as much as they do now. And we actually had a dice roll with him. I could have said no because it was my turn next, and but we had a dice roll. We had a roll off with a D20 to see who was going to DM next. And I was completely fine with whatever result it was. That's me just giving more than I'm receiving back, I suppose. I like to keep the peace. I like to go along to get along, and I guess that's probably the point I'm going to be making at the end. But I won the roll off, and he seemed like he was okay with that. It was time for my session to come around, and my friend, really my best friend, in many ways, couldn't make the starting session, and I felt terrible. But D&D is a group game, and if most of your group can make it, you continue on. I could have postponed the start, I suppose. It wouldn't have really mattered too much to me. It would have probably gave me more time to make some cooler stuff, which it was pretty good, I feel, starting out. And we it was pretty much theater of the mind at that point, because we weren't at the tabletop, and I had to make do with my laptop, and turning it to them, showing them the map, in relation to where they were and things like that. And we had our first session. It's the introduction session, like you always have. It kind of starts off with a little bit of a slow burn, and then kind of picks up steam as you go, as the players find their footing in the world and things like that. And find things that they want to discover, pursue, investigate, And the first session lasted about 5 hours. It was pretty much improv. Um, I had a page of notes, but I didn't actually, that I printed out. But I just kind of used just a bit of it, because that's how I do it. I make notes, I over prepare, and then I pick and choose as the time comes to actually use those things, and then add additional things at the time. That's the improv part of D&D. And they seem to love it. And the reason I know that they seem to love it is because they wanted our next session to be the very next day. Okay? And that isn't the typical D&D schedule. You don't usually play daily. And so the next session was a little bit more improv because, I had time to prepare for the first session a bit with the notes. The second session came around the next day, and they got into combat. I adequately explained the enemies that they were facing. I think they were ghouls or something like that. It was 3 ghouls actually, and they were off in the distance. But I explained that. I explained how far away they were, and they were rooting around a farm field, I think, and they were looking for something to eat or whatever. Presumably, they were just smelling around and things, but they were pretty far away. They weren't a danger to the party or to the city, the starting city that they were in. So they fired on these creatures from the distance that they were at. They closed the gap with these creatures. Clearly, they wanted to have a fight. Instead of staying behind the wall and closing and barring the gates, and I explained that a few times when they were playing, how the town had a gate, how there were stairs on either side that led up to a wall that was I think it was 20 feet tall, 25 feet tall, and they could have fired from the wall their arrows and things, and with advantage for height on the enemy. Instead, they left the town, left the gates open and everything like that, and went into melee combat, hand to hand. And one of the players was a hunter, I believe. The other one was a sorcerer, and the other one, a rogue, I want to say. I kind of forget, but they went into melee combat, and it was the sorcerer who went the furthest in melee combat. He was the one trying to tank this fight. At level 1, sorcerers aren't that powerful. Magic users tend to gain power as they level, and their reward for lasting, because they have less health and less constitution and strength and all that kind of stuff, their reward is that they're almost always going to do more damage and be better than the melee classes in terms of firepower, literally, because they cast fireballs and things. And so they went into melee combat, and the sorcerer missed some of, I think he missed some of his attacks, because sorcerers aren't, melee builds, typically, and especially at level 1, with the lowest hit points of the group at that point. And they went into melee combat, and I was trying to kind of save them a bit. I could have probably hammered them. And, if you do that as a DM, it's fine, because that's your player's fault. you're reacting to their reactions, and they should accept the consequences. And unfortunately, he died. I had the ghouls like do some silly things, like try to make athletics checks and things to jump across a small creek and stuff that they could just walk across. That's difficult terrain. And I had him jump across, and he kind of failed it. And so I had him fall back into the water and kind of float downstream a bit, to try to take one of the fighters out of the picture. So it's 3-on-2 at that point, because they chose wrong. They chose wrong from the beginning. And so I was trying to have leniency on them. And then the ranger joined melee combat. Okay. Uh, what is the prefix of ranger? Range, from a distance. From a distance. So he joined melee combat too. I think he had a crit miss, and it went bad. Two of the party members went down after like 3 rounds of combat, or 4 rounds of combat, or something like that, because I had the ghouls, once the party shot at them from a very far range with disadvantage, react to that. They reacted to the miss, to the arrow coming near them, but not hitting them. And so they used all their actions to dash towards the party. And 2 of the 3 people went down. The third person managed to finish the fight. And the session, they were brought back, or they would have been brought back. I don't think they went. They had no magical abilities to be brought back. They failed death saves, and that's a part of the D&D mechanic. Death saves. If you have 10 or higher, you get a success. 9 or lower is a failure. A 1, rules as written, is 2 failures, and a 20, rules as written, is an automatic stabilization. You're back. You're back up. You're conscious, rather. You're not back up on your feet. You're conscious, though. Not in danger of dying unless you get hit again, I suppose. But so I was going to have the next session be the one who was still left. Bringing these people back to town and things like that, and getting them repaired up, and they did a quest for the church. I forget what church it was, Kellenvor, I think, maybe. And the church was going to bring them back as the favor that they did the first session of going to explore the graveyard and see what was going on, why these undead were starting to come into the valley. And the church had sent paladins to the graveyard, and they went and helped assist the paladin and got him out of there safely and brought him back to town. And so they were heroes, for level 1. And I suppose my only mistake, maybe, in that point was I didn't advance them from level 1 to level 2 off of that. But they kind of avoided the combat, but they still did save them. So, I gave them, partial credit. Like 100 or 200 experience, I think, or something like that. I think. I don't exactly remember how much experience I gave them, but it was basically about half the amount, or 3/4 of the amount, to get from level 1 to level 2. And so after this fight, once they were back up and whatever, I was gonna go ahead and give them their level 2 for the next session, whenever it was, and then my friend who missed was going to come in as a level 2 or whatever level they were. He wasn't going to fall behind. I was That's not who I am. I wasn't going to allow that to happen. And so he was going to come in. He was supposed to come in on a ship from a different continent, and he was going to come into the city. They were going to meet him. They had a patron at the time who was waiting, so the story made sense because they're waiting for another ship. And so these NPCs, and along with my friend, were going to join the current party and the patron, and they were going to make their way up to the kingdom capital, Coventry. You know, which my current D Live group is actually in Coventry. And so they seemed fine with dying. They seemed to accept it. They're the ones who made the choice. They were the cause. The effect was that they died, and they seemed okay with it. They did put a lot of work into the backstory, which I loved them. All their backstories were top notch, amazing, all of them. I still would tell them that to this day if I could.
I have to answer the phone.
Okay.
Hello?
Hold on. Just fast forward to this part, so I don't have to edit it out. So I can give you as many videos as possible.
Date, so
Sorry. Uh, there was a phone call, so I had to pause the video real quick. I didn't actually know OBS had a pause function until just now, so I could have just paused it, and I'll probably just edit this whole portion out. Um, where was I? I don't exactly. Okay, so yeah, so the players went and they made the bad situation worse, and I try to have the NPCs help them from the wall shooting arrows, and I actually went through a little skill challenge where the ranger helped the people on the wall, gave them a little bit of instruction, um, and I let them take over. Pretty much those duties from the veteran guard captain. But it's a small settlement, and even though they're only level one, I still try to do things here and there to make the players feel special from the NPCs. Because if all the NPCs are just exceptionally more powerful than the players, then why would they play? The NPCs could do everything. Why would they have to do anything? That's my belief anyway. So they went out. They got messed up. Fun time messed up, and the one player survived, and the session ended there. And everybody seemed like they were okay with it. They kind of were grumbling a bit, but they presumably understand that's how D&D goes, especially when you make the wrong decisions in a series of wrong decisions. And so it's getting time for it's getting closer to presumably the third session, and my friend is going to be able to join us at that point, I believe. And he told me that they weren't about it. They weren't about it, and they were going to let me show up for the session and prepare for the session, and then just ambush me with this information that they were no longer going to be playing, that they basically committed a coup against me, and I was out as the DM. This came as a shock to me. Thinking about it now, it still is. Because that isn't the way that you would view friends to act towards you. We hung out outside D&D. Had drinks. Bachelor party, wedding reception, the actual wedding, and these were all events centered around my friend. He had got married, and the bachelor party, and all those types of things. And so I thought these folks were my friends, true friends, and I thought we were going to be friends, from here on. And it got to the point where I felt like I had to justify myself. They try to flip it on me, like it was my fault for their actions. And hindsight, it wasn't. And they were just horrible players that probably should touch up on their skills if they want to get to a good table. But I knew the one player from the previous campaign at the table had a history of going off, trying to do his own thing, making the wrong decision, and getting killed. When he did it at the table for my friend, when he was DMing, he was completely fine with that. He was completely fine with that. Somehow, since my friend wasn't there, they did this little coup, and we were in the Facebook group, and I justified everything that happened, and explained why it happened the way it did, and trying to salvage these people who I thought were friends. Uh, Again, hindsight, I should have just let them go. It wasn't worth it. I should have just let them go. Save myself the grief. Save it for people who are worth my time. Um, because time's the most valuable commodity that you'll have in your life. It isn't money; it's time. Um, and so I was told a whole bunch of excuses. My campaign, it was like Game of Thrones, um, which I thought was hilarious, and I still do, because the only similarity to Game of Thrones is they were at the graveyard and there was undead, and there was snow in the area with a white dragon, and the valley was separated from the other area by a wall, and it wasn't a wall necessarily. It formed a wall, I suppose, but it was just large chunks of ice, that have been there, frozen and refrozen and hardened and added to over the course of centuries, decades. Certainly, I hadn't put a time frame on my campaign just yet on the world, so certainly decades. Um, and the reason those things formed is because of the regional effects of a white dragon. Rules as written. And I said that to them, and it was like I didn't even say it. Uh, it's because there was no defense to it. There's no defense to it. That's a KO, knockout, mic drop situation, and it wasn't acceptable to them. And so I kept talking, and it just seemed like this was planned from the beginning at that point. And I actually, at that point, unfortunately, a mistake on my part, kind of started getting upset at my friend because I thought maybe he was mad at me for not waiting for him. But in D&D, you know that if you have the group ready, if depending on the size of the group, of course, if you have a player or two players who aren't able to make it, it's okay to continue. Hindsight, it was the very first session, and then the second session, I probably should have waited. That was my bad. That's probably the lesson I could take from this. But if you have players at your table, if you're a DM, or if you're a fellow player and you have other players at the table that are like this, maybe it's time to move on. Maybe it's time to get out of there. Um, the expression is no D&D is better than bad D&D. And I didn't want this group to break up because I thought we were friends. I thought we were good friends. I thought we were all going to take our turns, and we were going to make a D&D YouTube show and make some D&D products and things like that, and make an honest try at this. And it fell apart just like that because they ran into the melee and died. That's an extreme overreaction from a player. And in that situation, without the overarching whole situation, but that little dichotomy of the situation, it wasn't my fault that they died. I had good rolls. They had bad rolls. They made the decision to run into melee as a ranged, as a ranged caster. Um, the ranged caster decided to go in first to try to tank, and it was a fight they didn't even need to have. And my one of the other players, who wasn't hosting this at their house, the other player, um, was you know giving it to me basically. The one who survived was the newest member of the group. He had joined specifically for those sessions and that campaign, and I feel very terrible for that player. But I think, from what I heard, they're all in their own campaign, and he's still getting to be a player. And uh, I'm happy for him to be able to still play. And unfortunate the situation happened like it did. All the excuses from the players, the loss of what I thought to be very good friends, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I guess I could give you some excuses from that player. He thought the farm was the one inside the town when I described it and showed them physically on the map that it was the one outside of the town. He thought that 3 ghouls was too much for 3 level 1 players, and I agree. And that's why they weren't in combat. They weren't. It wasn't forced upon them. They forced the combat to happen. All of their decisions culminated and resulted in their actions, their overreactions, and them losing. If I may be do a little bit of a humble brag here, one of the best friends that they could have. Um, you know, and it I can't. I mean, do I still think about it? Not really, but when I do think about it, I still can't understand I still can't understand the reasoning for their reaction. Um, and I probably never will, and I probably will never talk to him again. Uh, you know, the one who was the host had gotten into a accident recently, um, and they had gotten hurt quite bad, from what I understand. And I wanted to go visit them to make sure they were okay, uh, and try to patch things up, perhaps. But after thinking about it, I was like, why would I want to patch things up with somebody like that? Somebody who's going to make me feel like I'm in the wrong when they are in the wrong. Uh, and so that's my lesson, I suppose. Look out for these flags and get out of there as soon as you can. Don't waste your time. So this is my first video of today. There's going to be a few more. I'm not going to tell you how many more. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know the range of how many videos I'm going to probably make today. And if you don't follow me on Twitter and things like that already, don't worry about it, because eventually, here pretty soon, I'm going to start, when I start firing things up more than I'm doing already. Because my first step was promoting, on social medias already. But I'm going to eventually add, thumbnails into my videos and give my social media things, and then you'll eventually have access to my Discord and some other goodies, and those are going to be firing up pretty soon. Right now, I'm focusing on making content for you, and not on the flair and fluff of the channel. I try to get you guys as much content as I can, and have it be very good quality at the same time, with a little bit less work, so I can make more content. And then once I have a decent amount of content, which I do now, um, you know I'm ramping things up, which I started on the 1st of January. Started promoting. Eventually, here pretty soon, I'm gonna have a TikTok. Well, I already have a TikTok, but eventually I'm gonna make videos. I'm coming up with ideas in my head, even while I'm working, and so pretty soon you're gonna have a lot if you follow and if you comment and things like that, and you'll have a lot more people to interact with, hopefully, really soon. Um, you know, so this is probably going to be maybe a semi-regular series because I have quite extensive list of horror stories, and most of them are from the same campaigns because I had said before I've played in about 8 campaigns, and like 6 of them were one shots. No, no, not 6. 4. I think 4 of them were one shots, and then 4 of them were actually campaigns, with 2 of them being Adventures League. So there's my story. It's pretty long. Um, you know, hopefully you can take a lesson from it. Maybe multiple lessons, right? Have a great day. Saul Sunforge, sign out. I'll see you soon with the next video.